So, what is the problem? Clearly, patients want to get an appointment. But you've already said that patients often have multiple problems, and yet you're being asked, you've come here for one appointment and one problem, and often you're finding, yes, but we've got lots of problems to talk about. How do you decide what's important and what isn't? This is a real problem as well, that you do get an appointment and then you miss it. And last month, I think we lost 55 hours worth of appointments with doctors, nurses and healthcare assistants. So on the one side, you're turning around and saying, why can we not get an appointment? And I can tell you, it's 55 hours worth of our appointments last month went missing across the practice. And I'm sure you'll also find that these are precious things. They're not free. But there's something about how can we try and prevent and not blame anybody. It's not about blaming at all, but thinking about if we could cut down the number of DNAs, could that make a difference? Sometimes you might think it's a really simple problem that takes 2 minutes, but actually it's quite a complex and difficult problem. You don't know that, and sometimes we don't know that either. And that becomes a challenge because it all sounds like it's just one problem, but some things are easier to fix and others are not so, and take longer, and that can cause difficulties. And then there's some of the barriers that we've got, and clearly language is a big barrier. So in a way I'm pleased that all of you speak English, but we need to think about the people who aren't in this room, because they're the ones who can't speak English and they're trying to deal with the system itself. So how do we try and overcome some of those difficulties? Then we've got cultural barriers, the expectations that are very specific for our own culture, and that might be different to the culture that people that are born in this country, grown up in this country, or others from a different culture come from. So there's some challenges around expectations that you might have that are different to what staff might experience, or even the culture of the NHS or our own practices. Then we've got communication barriers. It might be that you're not confident in, not just about language, but in communicating in general and sharing ideas. If you're a very personal person, a very private person, it can be quite difficult if you're now being asked to talk about things to someone. And if you don't talk about those things, we don't necessarily deal with the problem itself. I know that a number of patients will choose to come to me because they feel as though we've built up a relationship over a period of time, and that patient feels as though they want to talk to someone who knows them and their community. And that can be quite difficult, because if you can't reach out to that person who knows you or understands you, then they're not likely to be able to help you as much. And that might be real or it might be perceived, but nonetheless it's a problem that people are saying. And this again, a lot of these things don't just apply to this community, it applies to everybody. Ideally you want to find someone that knows you and your family. And then people are turning around and saying, look, I'm not just a blood test, I'm not just a person with diabetes or heart disease or whatever it might be, and saying I want the person to treat me as a person and not just that problem itself. This is becoming a much, much bigger problem, and I'm sure when we start talking about what some of the solutions are, and I start telling you about all the different services that are out there, and it might be one NHS, but ring this number at this time, and ring that number at that time, and go to this place over here, and you're registered at Brooks Surgery, but you have to come over here for the evening meetings, and in January we're going to change from here, and it's going to be Union Street where you go to. It seems as though change is happening all the time, and we are struggling to keep on top of it. So what chance have you got, especially if you start thinking about some of those things? So sometimes there seems to be too many choices, and you feel as though, why can't it be just one thing? Then of course there's massive time constraints that everyone is under. You're under it, we're under it as well, so short space of time, how can we get the best out of that? Oftentimes you might have a physical problem, diabetes, heart disease, COPD, whatever, but often if you've got a physical problem, that creates mental health problems as well. Now that itself is a big issue, because, and I'm sure you're aware of this, but there isn't a term to use in the Bengali language, or in the Hindi language, or in the Urdu language that talks about mental health, because it's not really something that, as a culture, we recognise. And we come across that all the time. So we'll say to somebody, you're depressed, and they go, oh, I'm not sleeping very well. I'm aching everywhere, because it's not really something they understand, and that becomes a problem. Is how do you explain to someone who's got a mental health problem when it's not part of our culture, it's not something that we have. And then we come across a lot of issues where actually you're coming along and talking about it as a problem because it's you, but actually the problems are in the family. And it gets even more difficult when the problems aren't even in the family here, but they're in the family back home in Bangladesh. And that's causing all sorts of issues, but it's impacting on you here. And you're trying to fix the problem here. No one knows really how to fix it. You're coming to us to talk to us about how to fix it, when actually these are issues around the family. Some of those issues are not necessarily medical, but they become medical if it starts to affect you mentally, or it affects you in terms of your physical problems. And then sometimes it's not even the family. Sometimes there are issues in the community that are more wider. And of course, when you're trying to fix the problem, it's no good trying to fix the individuals. We then need to bring a community approach. And in some ways, this meeting, the fact that we've got people coming from a number of different practices, is an indication that really this is reaching out to the Hyde community, rather than just talking about Thornley House or talking about Brook Surgery or whatever. And it's just an indication that, which problem are we talking about and where's the best way of trying to fix it. Is care closer to home? Whenever we've done surveys, we being the NHS, and asked people, where do you want to be treated? Of course people will say, I want to be treated at home, I want to be treated in my own GP surgery, I want to be treated in Hyde. But increasingly you're finding that if appointments aren't available even in the local hospital, you're having to travel further afield. So you might have to go to Wythenshawe Hospital, you might have to go to Salford Royal, and how do you get from here to Salford Royal? And that becomes a big problem if you've never travelled further afield. And that can create problems in itself, because you're being told you have to go somewhere, but you don't know how to get there. And again, if you've got language problems and cultural barriers and communication barriers and all the rest of it, then suddenly trying to get to Salford becomes a major problem, or Wythenshawe, or wherever it might be. And then there are different issues. We talk about patients as all being the same, but there are particular issues that young children have got. There are other issues that you might have as adults, and then there are even bigger issues, or different, I shouldn't say bigger, but different issues if you're elderly. And we're thinking about the different types and different stages in your life and how it presents and what the solutions might be and difficulties. And then I'm increasingly finding that we've got patients where they've got their children who are their main carers. The children are the ones who speak English and are able to communicate and explain things to them, and that creates problems, because do you want to use your children? Is it appropriate to use your children for that purpose? It might well be things that you only want to deal with privately. Or sometimes it's the other way around, where you're the carer and you're now trying to help your parents, and you're feeling a bit uncomfortable because you're thinking, this isn't right, and really, mum and dad should be the ones speaking on their own, but they can't, and you feeling as though you're needing to help them. We know there's a lot of people here who haven't got jobs, and even those that have got jobs, they're in low-paid jobs. They're working very, very late at night, working very, very long hours. We've got a number of patients who are taxi drivers who've been working through the night, and they're absolutely exhausted, 12, 13, 14 hours, and then they're expected to pick up the phone and sit on the phone for 45 minutes at 8 o'clock in the morning to get through, and yet they're absolutely exhausted and tired. And when they don't do that, and then ring about 11 o'clock and told, sorry, all the appointments are gone, that doesn't seem fair. And we get that. We recognise that it's really, really hard, and they're working, but they also want a service, and how do we try and deliver a service? And then, because of the poverty, because of the fact that there's not much money, we know that if you haven't got money, that limits the number of choices that you can make around what you do and how you do things and things. And so not having a job and poverty and being dependent on benefits itself creates major problems. And then of course now at the moment with the cutbacks in benefits, that's become a problem. I've just been late because I had to ring some patients up, and they're worried about the fact that they've lost benefits, and they now need forms filling out, and we're charging them for the cost of the forms to be created, and that just creates a big problem in itself. And if you don't get the benefits, that creates more pressure for you, your family and everybody else. You start thinking what's going on. And then we've got the digital divide. The whole thing about those people that are on the internet, well, they're okay, and I guess everyone in this room is okay because you've all got the internet. But some people don't have the internet, some people don't even know how to use the internet and things, and are they going to get left behind as a result of the fact that we're now doing more and more online? And that becomes a problem, and how do we make sure that we're reaching out to them? And I feel passionately, not just about the ones who have got the internet, but just as passionately, in fact probably even more passionately, about the ones who don't, to think about they're going to get further and further left behind unless we do something for them. And it's that, what do we do for them? And then some of you went along to that meeting 2-3 weeks ago that was done by the Greater Manchester Health and Social Care Partnership, and Maksud Ahmed, I think, was engaging with the women in this community and really talking about the fact that it's not good enough for you to rely on your husbands to be speaking for you. You have a voice too, and it's important that you raise that voice and you talk about the issues that matter to you, so that we inside the system can listen to you and hear about it. You don't need to rely on somebody else. But that requires a new set of skills, a new set of abilities, so that one day there's no reason why you can't come and stand up here and give a presentation like this and explain to people. We'll sit on the table and listen to you, because that's how the system's going to work. But in order to do that, you're going to have to need the confidence and the ability, and we've got to think about how we can reach out to you so that you become the leaders in the community and you start saying, look, Dr. Hannon, it's important that you listen to this, because it's really important, because this is what other women, other people are concerned about, worried about. But the difficulty with that is that, of course, where are the role models? And actually it's great, because I do see a whole load of role models, and we should have photographs of you in the surgery so people can say, do you know this person? She is one amongst you, she is a leader, she wants to raise the issues for you. So it's important that we actually raise your profile, make yourself visible so people know who you are, give you the opportunities to be able to stand up and speak and talk to patients, and then come back to us. Maybe if they're not willing to speak, I always prefer people to speak directly, but if they can't, then you're able to stand up and have a vision for that community and for people like yourself, so that you're not left behind. And then I'm going to finish with this thing about want versus need. Everyone wants things, but do you really need it? So we tend to talk about needs, but actually I'm now tending to move towards, well, if you want it, what's the problem with that? If you want it and you feel it's important, then we should try and cater for it. So I'm not as against the idea of wanting things, but there are constraints, there are difficulties around that. I might want everyone to be able to use the online services, but that's not going to happen. There's going to be some people who aren't going to be able to do it for all sorts of reasons. So want and need, but let's start thinking about that. Now, that was my thoughts early on this morning when I was sitting putting these slides together. Is there anything that you want to add to that list that isn't there already? Shall we keep
I
it?
think it covered it.
Covered it? Is there anything you think I missed out?
Maybe the appointments would be a bit different slot, like evening.
I'm going to come to that.
Oh, okay.
So we've got the patients want to get an appointment, and we'll talk a little bit more about how we do that. Hi Zoe. Zoe's our new trainee doctor. Do you want to just introduce yourself?
Oh, hi, I'm Zoe, one of the new F2 doctors working here.
And these are a number of ladies from 3 different practices. We've also got a GP from Brook Surgery and we've got a practice manager from Brook Surgery as well.
Hello.
So come and join us here. You've not missed anything. We've just started with trying to define what the problem is. We've got the camera on, so I hope you don't mind the camera being on, so that those people that couldn't be here can watch it again.
Can I also mention something else?
Yes, of course.
Like, obviously, there are some, like you said, language barrier. They need interpreters. Emergency appointments, you can't get an interpreter. Maybe that as well. We need that in place.
Yeah.
Put it there.
Yep.
It's not on there.
So I put in
Not
language
interpreter.
barrier and
Yeah.
communication barrier, and I guess because the
It'll come
interpreter
under
would
it.
help with some of the language and cultural stuff. And maybe somebody who knows you if it's a translator. But I'll come back to
Well, I have
translation
been
services.
bilingual for here for
Yeah.
mental health patients.
Yeah.
Mm.
Anything else?
Anything else?
You might come up with other ideas, but that was the sort of the list of things. Is there anything, Simon, from your point of view that you think?
Health education probably that will come under.
I think, So do you want to say a little bit about health education?
Yeah, basically, I know in our community we don't know much about chronic disease, what to manage, the importance of lifestyle in our lives. And also, we try to medicate most of the things. We don't really change our lifestyle. So maybe that kind of thing. Also, we trust more on antibiotics.
True.
Yeah, that's true.
Medication.
Paracetamol.
Yeah.
So I think for that reason, but I feel that quite a few patients who keep attending, which they can wait and they will be better. So again, if maybe like we can improve appointment system, if we can save those appointments, and most of the people, they are not aware of minor ailment scheme. They won't go and speak to pharmacists, so maybe it's just informing them
Some
about
of the
what services.
some of the really minor stuff, like with chest infections on children,
Yeah.
I've seen with my kids. Two of my kids, they're like 5 and 2 years old. They've never used antibiotics in all their life. It's because as soon as they start getting a runny nose or a cold, I just give them steam,
Yeah.
and before it develops any further, it just goes. So that's the whole winter problem solved for me.
Yeah.
So you're absolutely right, and clearly there's knowledge there, and there's an example of you've learnt something.
Yeah, and if other people do that,
Not
it'll save them a
everybody
lot on
does.
antibiotics and just going
Well,
around to the
like she
doctors
said,
as well.
health education, like in certain groups, you can develop, deliver health education. People can
First and
learn.
foremost, and then you can
And,
cut
you
back
know,
there
You can
with the
put back there
appointments.
because people will learn as well. Because nobody's going nowhere, nobody's actually getting together. You know, like our group, we've got a group. If somebody can deliver that, that would be really good. At least the ladies will learn. And then we need to actually run to the doctors every 5
Okay,
minutes.
so we're going to come back to solutions in a moment, but when you say if someone could learn, who do you think that someone would be?
This is the community,
Who?
Vulnerable
the
ladies.
vulnerable ladies, elderly ladies.
But who's going to deliver that?
The doctors.
Be a doctor.
One of the doctors.
You can deliver.
She can
Okay.
deliver.
Let's just hang that thought for a minute. We don't want to get into them and us. And I see the lines drawn down the middle here at the moment. But we'll come back to that. Okay.